is net zero to blame for supermarket shortages? Now, supermarkets like Asda, Morrison's, they've been rationing fruit and veg by placing limits on the number of cucumbers, lettuce and tomatoes that people can buy. Now, the reason for this, well, poor harvests in Spain and North Africa due to cold weather. And there's also a farming crisis in this country, which is caused by high energy costs, which have led to a lack of fresh produce. Plus, since the UK left the EU, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, otherwise known as DEFRA, has replaced the EU's Common Agricultural Policy with the Environmental Land Management Scheme. And the new scheme gives farmers financial incentives on conditions that they adopt higher environmental and sustainability standards in line with the net zero green agenda. So the high standards include things like the preservation of trees, shrubs and wildlife, which is all very laudable, but to the detriment of encouraging the production of food. However, Remainers blame Brexit, surprise, surprise. Now, this is despite the significant proportion of the UK's fresh produce coming from Morocco, a non-EU member. So, what do you think? For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is net zero to blame for supermarket shortages? Well, joining me now is senior meteorologist at British Weather Services, Jim Dale, Lois Perry, director of CAR26, landowner and columnist, Jaime Blackett, and former Labour Minister for Europe, Denis Macshane. I'm going to start with you, Jaime, because, Jaime, it was your article in The Telegraph that sort of prompted me to ask this question, because you felt that actually net zero had a lot to blame for this. Why did you think that?
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the first thing, obviously, is the cold weather in not hot weather, you'll note, down in southern Spain and North Africa, where we get a lot of our vegetables from. But, we should be growing a lot more of our own fruit and veg in this country. It is quite possible, actually, with the new technology, hydroponics and that kind of thing, to grow tomatoes and peppers and things. It's just that British farmers haven't really had the confidence to invest in glass houses and that kind of thing. We've outsourced that sort of production really to the Dutch, who have stolen a march on us, and the Spanish, because DEFRA, the green blob in DEFRA, don't really believe in food production. That we're wedded to this model of relying on being able to buy food from anywhere else in the world. And surprise, surprise, this week we've been caught out. It's partly our imperial past. We need to, if you like, decolonize our food strategy and concentrate more on growing it at home rather than being able to buy it anywhere else. And yes, you're right. The civil servants really give the impression, anyway, that they would like farmers to do almost anything other than grow food on their land. So there are a lot of mixed messages there. And if you're sitting here as a farmer wondering whether you're going to go and borrow hundreds of thousands of pounds to invest in upscaling your production or diversifying into growing new things, you're not really getting the right signals from government. And that is partly to do with net zero and this obsession with trying to save the world in one country, and planting trees on land that would otherwise be growing food, or putting solar panels on prime arable land that could be growing food.
Well, let's bring Jim Dale. I want to bring Jim in. Jim Dale, let me just bring Jim in. You're a meteorologist. He's saying that they're using a lot of that arable land to put solar panels on there. You probably get wind farms on there. In fact, these things could actually be used for growing food instead of us importing from other places.
Net zero is not the reason for deficiencies in the UK market at all. It's net zero is an evolution, not a revolution. It's a slow fuse, if you like. So this has happened in very quick time. What has happened in Morocco and Spain? Yeah, there's been some bad weather around, but you've got to think to yourself: cucumbers, tomatoes, raspberries. Most of these crops are grown undercover. They're not necessarily exposed to the weather per se. There has been bad weather, but it's tended to be away from these big agricultural areas. So if there is a deficiency, what it's showing up is the logistics in terms of moving those things. If a wagon driver wants to take their produce from, say, southern Spain to wherever it's going to go, they're going to choose countries that are a lot closer rather than having to go through the red tape that has now arrived with Brexit and other elements of this, rather than go to the UK. So kind of, in a way, it's an amalgamation of things, and it only starts with the weather per se, but only in a very small way.
But if those incentives weren't there and they were instead of building solar panels and stuff like that, we could grow stuff on our own land. Lois Perry.
Yeah, I mean, this just highlights the fact that we need to be energy independent and food independent. You know, it's completely disingenuous saying this is about red tape. It may be because it costs so much in fuel for the stuff to be transported. But, you know, if we were actually producing our own energy and producing our own food, this wouldn't be happening at all. Net zero as an ideology isn't a creeping, slow thing, like you just said. It's actually a revolutionary thing that wants to completely annihilate what most of us take for granted as our way of life. But you're right, we could be growing food in this country if the energy prices weren't so high. Just wanted to make one quick point, Nana. One of the reasons that we were not allowed to frack is because Quadrilla went over 0.5 on the Richter scale. This morning in Wales, there was an earthquake of 3.7, didn't cause that much damage. That's 63,000 times stronger in terms of the energy impact than what the fracking was allowed or not allowed to do. That was the reason they used for us not having our own energy. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Right, let's go to Denis Macshane.
Well, thanks, Nana. I didn't bring in with me, but a lovely little map I wanted to show on the studio, which showed all the countries of Europe where you can buy tomatoes, cucumbers, raspberries without any problem at all. Northern ones, southern ones, net zero ones, left-wing ones, right-wing ones. And the one country where we're imposing Second World War type food rationing is our beloved Britain. Now, I like turnips. I was with Therese Coffey when she said, let them eat turnips. That's why we voted Brexit in 2016. It was to have more turnips in the British diet. But seriously, the problem is, if you're a Dutch lorry driver, which brings a lot of tomatoes and other stuff to here, it is cheaper and quicker to drive all the way to Portugal than to navigate the Brexit delays.
Dennis, can I say, haven't you just highlighted the fact that we've been reliant too heavily on our European partners, and therefore, because we've been doing that within the EU and transporting things, where some of those things, tomatoes, we can grow in this country. And the problem, the reason we're not, is because we're sacrificing a lot of land for other things and incentivising.
Well, it's not just that. Think about where we are. We're in the middle of winter. It's not been. Yeah, we had December. We had the troll from the Trondheim come down. That was a difficulty. But the producers in this country are not turning their energy on for the cost reasons, to be frank.
Because of renewables, because renewables are so much...
Nothing to do with it.
It's completely because of renewables, because we're making our grid intermittent by having to rely on these renewable energies by law, and so therefore we're pushing the price of all of our fuel up, whether it's gas. Everything is going up because of this renewable scam. It really is to do with net zero. The Telegraph journalist is absolutely right. Across the board, it really is.
Well, other countries of net zero, much tougher, stricter net zero, they've still got tomatoes in their supermarkets.
Well, they might be hot.
Yeah, but that's, I think, partly the reason why we have lack of that is because we have been relying on these countries so much. I want to come back to Jim. Jim, look, I mean, you know, you're talking about the weather. It would be better if it was warmer.
We're getting there. I'll say.
Well, we haven't had any warming for 10 years, unfortunately.
Just going forward, and it's a bit of a weather forecast, if you like. We've been looking for this cold weather coming in. It's going to actually go into Europe rather than ourselves. So that's where the cold weather's going to go in the next fortnight or so. We're on the fringes of it. It's never going to be paradise. Look, let's make it clear where we are at this moment in time. The major problem that we've got going forward is actually drought. Some of the southeastern areas, particularly east and southeast, no rain. So that's going to be another problem.
Say, you know why that is? Because we've invested in these water companies that are actually elsewhere. We haven't built any more reservoirs. We could have caught loads of that rain. Let's go to... I want to have a chat with Jaime Blackett. I mean, look, you know, you've heard the arguments here that actually it's more to do with Brexit. Is there any level of that might be true? Because in my view, I think actually the fact that we were in the EU made us lazy.
I don't think you can really blame Brexit too much for this. I mean, I've actually been following this a bit on social media. There are shortages in some other countries as well. And I think where Brexit, I think, has been a bit of an issue for us farmers is finding labour. And obviously the fruit and veg is very, very labour dependent. And I think that has been a problem. I don't think it's necessarily Brexit per se. It's just the way that the politicians have, not seized the opportunities of Brexit. They've rather held back the agricultural sector by not doing the necessary things to provide us with the labour, either sort of getting people off benefits and into work, or allowing us to use unskilled foreign labour. I mean, whatever way you go about it, we are short of labour. I'm a dairy farmer. It's getting increasingly difficult to find people to milk cows. So I mean, in that sense, I think Brexit, or at least the interpretation of it and the way that it's all been handled, has not been helpful.
Well, I'm going to give Denis Macshane 20 seconds on this, because he didn't you write a book about it? So go on, Denis.
Four books.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Look, Joe, you're not going to get the average English working man out at 4 o'clock in the morning in a Lincolnshire field pulling out leeks in February. Hasn't happened for 100, 200 years. We had access to that giant European labour market pool of
so it's all right for other people, but not for our people. That's so xenophobic.
No.
That is so xenophobic.
If you paid them the wages that they would require,
I can't believe
Jamie
you just said that English people are too good to do it, and that other people go. That is not very European.
Ask Jamie if it's true or not.
That's awful.
Well, you know what? Also, the fact that we have relied on this European labour, cheap labour, and been drunk on the cheap labour, so which is undercutting the British workforce, has meant the British people aren't going to do it because it's not going to be worth their while, simply because they can't afford to live on the wages because we were in the EU and relying.
Jamie, can you double wages? Jamie double wages?
We currently have an all-British workforce, and they're young. They're all under 25. They're all very committed people, and so I mean, there are young people out there for whom agriculture would be a very bright future, but maybe the education system isn't selling it in the way that they should.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. That's with us, meteorologist and British Weather Services Jim Dale, Lois Perry, director of CAR26, landowner and columnist Jaime Blackett, and also Denis Macshane, former Labour Minister for Europe.